if you are interested in auto racing, you might know a man with a name like Jeff Gordon. He's one of the best in his business, in this business of auto racing. But what most people probably don't know, that one of the people that helped Jeff Gordon to get to that position is the man who has been the head of his pit crew. You've probably seen those high-speed cars swing into their service pit, and only a few seconds later, 12 seconds later or something, they roar back into the race. And it's so fascinating, it's almost unbelievable if you read about it or if you see what can happen in those 12 seconds in the service pit. Somebody who has visited the pit crew of Jeff Gordon wrote an article, and he called this article 11 Things I Learned from Jeff Gordon's Pit Crew. And in there he says the following. He says, the real race is in the pits, and every fraction of a second matters. Pit crew teammates endure drills, that's what I read, every day. Strength training, 4 days a week, and all of those 12-second pit stops they can stand on the weekend. This job for somebody working in this pit crew can sometimes cost something. Every time a crew member goes over the wall, something can go wrong. Ben Fishbeck of the number 5 team of this Jeff Gordon's pit crew was hit his very first time working. He broke his leg, his thumb, and suffered a concussion when an ARCA driver overran the pit box. When they work, the human eye isn't fast enough to follow a tire change they do in those pit stops. During a pit stop, a tire changer only has about, now listen, 0.8 of a second to pull 5 lag nuts. In under 1 second, he has to unscrew 5 nuts. You can imagine the training which goes into that kind of work. And they also write the game has changed and it's getting faster. According to Carnwell, 5 years ago it wasn't as competitive as it is now. You could have people a second and a half off. Now it is 1/10 of a second what they try to reach their goals are. Everyone I talked to agreed. To them, 1/10 of a second costs at least 1 place on track. Unbelievable. But what do we want to learn about this? During the last days of the Apostle Paul's life, he was bound in chains, again, in a Roman cell. He obviously knew that the end of his life was imminent when he wrote his second epistle to Timothy, the last writing we have from the Apostle Paul. Evidently, he had already been tried, convicted, and condemned for preaching Christ. And perhaps the day of his execution was already scheduled, we don't know. But he wrote to Timothy, I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. He writes this in 2 Timothy 4, verse 6. I am already being poured out. He knew his end was near. We know that in spite of these circumstances, Paul's faith remained strong. But being human, like you and me, Paul was not immune to natural emotions that we all have in times of struggles and hardships. And he says in 2 Timothy chapter 1, in verse 15, he says, this you know, that all those in Asia have turned away from me. At the very end of his life, of his service. Among them are Phygelus, Phygelus and Hermogenes. While Paul was spreading the gospel in Asia, he was looked up, and the Christians, he was locked up, and the Christians turned their backs on him. And now, during these dark days of loneliness, discomfort, disappointment, and uncertainty, the Lord provided for Paul a measure of refreshment through a man whose name is not very well known, and his name is Onesiphorus. I don't know exactly if I spell it correctly. It's quite a mouthful, 5 syllables. How heart-wrenching it was for Paul that people who he probably ministered and served with, later finding out that they have turned their backs on him. Has anybody been there before? Please don't raise your hands. It might be a little bit awkward if others see you. But we've maybe been in those situations that we somehow feel those people we tried to help, they're just turning their backs on us. Paul knew what he was talking about. And when things in our life or in your life got tough, and those who you thought would help you, would hang in there, all of a sudden left you. Paul, who is the greatest missionary and the greatest theologian who ever walked on this planet maybe, we might think, okay, everybody else but not Paul. I mean, he doesn't really need spiritual assistance. He doesn't really need encouragement. He's certainly one who would be giving spiritual assistance to others. But we will find out today that the fact of the matter is we never in our lives come to the point where we do not have need of one another. And here is the story of an unsung hero from our word in 2 Timothy chapter 1. And let's read it together. 2 Timothy 1, verse 16 to 18. Paul continues and says, "The Lord grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, for he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chain. But when he arrived in Rome, he sought me out very zealously and found me. The Lord grant to him that he may find mercy from the Lord in that day. And you know very well how many ways he ministered to me at Ephesus." Onesiphorus his name means prophet bringer. And he really did live up to his name. Maybe you have noticed in verse 15, just the verse before that, Paul mentions 2 other brothers, Phygelus and Hermogenes. Now we don't know much about them either. But the fact that Paul mentions them here shows that Paul was surprised about those 2 brothers. He was surprised that those 2 brothers left him also when he was arrested in Rome. These 2 brothers were probably the type to tell Paul, don't worry, I'm with you. I got your back. I'll pray for you. And yes, they surely were with him in the good times. But now, when he maybe needed it the most, he had to say that even they left him. But this valuable ministry of this Onesiphorus brought to Paul a means of refreshment whom Paul would value eternally. We find in the Bible several Onesiphorus or prophet bringers. One other example would be for us Elijah. Elijah was ready to quit. depressed and threatened, he turned in his prophet's badge and brought out his resignation. But God refused to accept. He gave him rest, good food, and Onesiphorus, named Elisha, who ministered to him. We read about it in 1 Kings 19. One more example. King David was hunted and haunted by the King Saul. Between Saul and David, however, stood a man named Jonathan, loyal and dependable. Jonathan assured David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." He says that in 1 Samuel 20, verse 4. "Whatever you say, I will do for you." No limits, no conditions, no bargains, no reservations. And best of all, when the things were at their worst, we read in chapter 23:16, he went to David and encouraged him in God. Wow, what a friend. He did that because he was committed to the basic principles of friendship. Because he loved him, we read in chapter 18, he loved him as he loved himself. It was a special bond between those two friends. It was the kind of love that causes men to lay down their lives for their friends. As we read in John 15:13, where Jesus said, "And there is no greater love than if somebody lays down his life for a friend." That's what Jesus said. And what about us? Do we need an Onesiphorus every once in a while as well? Sometimes we meet a person who seems to be so independent and who shuns the idea that he needs such an Onesiphorus, feeling that Onesiphorus are just for the immature, for the spiritual babes, or those who haven't learned to trust only in the Lord. I don't know if you have met somebody like that, but I have to say I pity a person like that, because either they are simply so short-sighted, or maybe they're not quite honest. I don't know. We all need an Onesiphorus. Even when Paul needed one, we for sure do as well. Maybe just a quick question on the side. Do you think, does every pastor need an Onesiphorus? I mean, you brothers and sisters here in Barrett, you are lucky. You have a pastor who is always happy, who is always joyful. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't need one. Yeah. Okay. Thanks to God. Yeah. So I think we all should agree that we need a friend like that. And I'm too glad and thankful for those Onesiphorus in my life. And the good thing is their names are not as long. They're much easier to pronounce. And some of them are even here in our midst today. Thank God for that. But wait a minute. We just said we all need an Onesiphorus, but where do you get them from? And that brings us to the next thought. If we want to have an Onesiphorus, we, at some point in time, have to be an Onesiphorus for somebody else. See, you can't control whether you have a friend like that or not. I mean, this is a blessing. This is something you can thank God for, but you can't demand it from somebody. But what you can do, that is, you can decide to be a friend like this. Although the Bible says, "He that refreshes others will himself be refreshed." And I believe this is true. And Jesus also said, "With the measure you use, it will be measured to you." So this is good to keep in mind. If you acknowledge that you need an Onesiphorus, then you need the same measure. You have to be an Onesiphorus for somebody else. Onesiphorus had a ministry of refreshment. Paul describes him as one who often refreshed him, we just read. There might be people right now, even here in our midst, who are at a tough time in a race. They're maybe slowing down, overheating. They're under heavy pressure. They might feel that they can't finish their race. And the difference in their race is going to be somebody who is willing to step up and be their pit crew. Someone like you, someone who follows the example of Onesiphorus we just read about, and who frequently asks the Lord and prays and says, "Lord, what could I do that would refresh my hurting friend?" Maybe a call, maybe an email, maybe a text, maybe a meal, maybe offering time to babysit. It says here, "He often refreshed me." We can see that Onesiphorus had a real, genuine concern for Paul. He got out of his way to find him. We read in verse 16, in verse 17, "But when he arrived in Rome, he sought me out very zealously and found me." When Onesiphorus, I believe he lived in Ephesus, when he came to Rome, he looked, and it says here, "He sought me out very zealously." He showed a real effort. He made a real effort. And those people who are in need of an Onesiphorus, they have to know that out there is somebody who will be always there, even when everybody else walks out. Those people, they will walk in. They will be there. They won't turn their back on you. It is common for people to say to someone who is in need, "Now, if there's anything I can do, just call." And that's good if we offer that to somebody, and it's a good intention. But usually, or oftentimes, the person in need does not call. And all too often, we who speak such words do not check back. And the opportunity to minister might be missed. But Onesiphorus was one who had a genuine concern and acted upon it without being asked. He didn't wait for Paul to call him and to ask him, "Could you come? Could you please visit me? I need help. I'm down. I need encouragement." He went out and he looked for him. I read a story about 73-year-old Alvin Strite. He lived in Lawrence, Iowa. His brother, age 80, lived several hundred miles away in Blue River, Wisconsin. According to the Associated Press, Alvin's brother had suffered a stroke, and Alvin wanted to see his brother. But he had a transportation problem. He didn't have a driver's license because of his eyesight, and he apparently had an aversion to taking a plane or train or bus. But Alvin didn't let that stop him. In 1994, he climbed aboard his 1966 John Deere tractor lawnmower and drove it all the way to Blue River, Wisconsin. brotherly love will always find a way to show his love. We read about Onesiphorus here that he also risked being ridiculed. In verse 16, at the end we read, "And he was not ashamed of my chains." Apparently others had abandoned Paul, who were more concerned with their own welfare, maybe with their reputation, than Paul's needs. Perhaps they thought that it was too risky to be labeled with Paul. But being a servant of the Lord means being willing to step outside of the comfort zone sometimes and help someone in need. To step outside of the padded pews and look for somebody who might be in real need, no matter of color, financial status, and on and on. Onesiphorus was also persistent in his task. We read it already, I would repeat it one more time. "But when he arrived in Rome, he sought me out very zealously, and he found me." Onesiphorus was committed and persistent at being a minister of refreshment. Paul, someone else may have thought, yes, I'm going to Rome, and I know Paul is in prison, but I'll see if I have enough time, I'll try to stop by. I have other business to do, but I might try and contact Paul. But not here, our friend. He made a diligent effort to seek our Paul and find him for the purpose of ministering to him. He overcame great obstacles, and in the maze of those prison cells maybe, he could have easily given up. Because it says here, he sought me out very zealously and found me. It sounds like he really had to look for him. It wasn't simple, it wasn't easy to find him. But he didn't give up. We sometimes, even if we already try to help somebody, but then it gets too difficult, it gets too late, and we say, I really have to go now, and I'm sure Paul will understand. I tried my best, it just didn't work out this time, and that may be the end of it. Or if we want to sound even more spiritual, we might say something like, it must have not been God's will for us to find Paul this time. And we go back home. But not Onesiphorus. He really did his best. He sought zealously and found him eventually. In spite of all the difficulties of the task, Onesiphorus persevered. We could say he was a member of like Jesus said, of the second mile club. He was willing to pay the price to minister. He was willing to go this second mile and to reach out. And when he finally found Paul, it was just the perfect timing. It was just what Paul needed in that particular situation on that day. And sometimes your thoughtful gesture, your little text, your email, whatever, might also arrive just at the right time, at the time when a person really needs it. Paul states also that Onesiphorus often refreshed him. That breeze of fresh air feels best when you're in a hot environment, and he refreshed him. A glass of cold water is best when you are really thirsty. An act of kindness, even if it seems very small and might seem sometimes even insignificant to us, but for the other person, it could mean a lot for somebody who is really in need of it. What am I trying to say? You and me, we all need to be ministers of refreshment. If God puts it in your heart to minister to somebody, Maybe even somebody that you wouldn't think of, or other people you think who don't really need this ministry of refreshment. But if God puts it on your heart, will you go? Will you pay the price? Will you be willing to look for that person, make an effort, and don't give up until you find him? We have to be close to the Lord in order to hear his orders. And I'm sure he wants to use you. He wants to use us. And one more thing. Please don't worry. If nobody mentions your name afterwards, I don't know what the name of the pit crew hero of Jeff Gordon, and that is not all that important. But the good thing is, we know that God is keeping track, and he will reward you accordingly. He has even promised it. We read in Hebrews 6 verse 10, God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him, as you have helped his people and continue to help them. Isn't that a wonderful promise for all of those who are willing to work in this pit crew, in this race? In Proverbs 11:25 we read, he that refreshes others will himself be refreshed. If you want to be refreshed at one point in your life, you have to start now. You have to give so that you could receive. That's what the Bible says. He that refreshes others, that person will himself be refreshed. We want to ask us tonight, are we making it harder for our brothers and sisters to run their race? Or are we one of those heroes who are offering themselves to refresh others, to take care of their needs? What God puts on your heart, what you will be willing to do for somebody else, may be the difference in someone's running this race and finishing well. God help you, God help me, and God bless you together. Thank you. Amen.